Welcome back to Bounce Around Charleston. Standing here with me, Dr. Thaddeus Bell.
Thank you.
And Kendra Snipe. Welcome to Bounce Around Charleston. Now, we want to talk about something that I'm quite sure everyone is familiar with. Holiday depression. What is that?
Holiday depression, a very common medical syndrome. It has to do with a significant change in mood and how people feel based on the fact that they are experiencing things that are contrary to the holiday. For an example, most of us think that Christmas time, Thanksgiving, New Year's are going to be times when people are very, very happy. But to a significant part of the population, that represents a time in which we feel very, very sad because people are not present anymore. Relationships have been broken. The mere fact that the holiday itself puts a lot of pressure on people, a lot of expectations that some people cannot meet.
But shouldn't it be a time of celebrating and excitement? So why is it that people are depressed? I mean, like you just said, money.
Money. So, for an example, if you are a father, a young father, and you have children and a wife, and the holiday season comes with presents and gifts, and you are not in a position to measure up to that, that puts a lot of pressure on people because they can't measure up. Or for an example, if last year your mother or your wife or your husband was living during that point, during that time, and something happened and they passed away, so when the season comes back around again, the mere fact that they are not there, sometimes illness will cause people to have depression, or holiday depression. If you were healthy last year and now this year you're sick, it represents a loss of something.
Okay, so Kendra, what is your take on this?
From a counseling perspective, you mentioned that the holidays, it's a happy time, lots of shopping and cooking. And Dr. Bell mentioned, like, if you don't have the means to be able to do that, especially if you've done it in the past, that can bring on depression. It's also a time where you're happy and it's a joyous occasion, but if that person who you remember sharing those times with are no longer there, that brings on that bout of depression as well.
And depression can hit any one of us.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember a point in my life, I didn't know at that time I was depressed, but I would pile up everything on my bed, just get in the bed every night, not move anything, until one day there was no more space. And I said, something's wrong with this picture.
Right.
And I discovered for myself, I'm depressed.
Yeah, you lose energy, you feel like you're in a big hole. Sometimes people present with physical symptoms. Sometimes it can be headaches, sometimes it can be a stomach pain. I went through a depression about 22 years ago, a major depression, when my son unexpectedly passed away. And so immediately after that time, I went through a grief reaction, but then it turned into a depression. And some of my colleagues recognized, and some of my running buddies recognized that I was depressed, and so they tried to get me back into doing the things that I was accustomed to doing before that happened. But I eventually had to go on medications. One of my friends is a psychiatrist, and he recognized that I needed to be on medications, and so I took the medications, and it did help.
So you're a doctor, I'm a pastor, and we're here standing here telling the public that we have gone through depression, which says to them, it can happen to you.
It can happen to you, it can happen to anybody. And when it does happen, then they need to seek out the attention of people like Kendra, who is a therapist and who talks people through that.
So Kendra, if someone came to you, so for instance, if I came to you and shared my experience, what would you tell me?
Well, the first question I would ask is to kind of give me an idea of some of the events of your life, like what happened to you that could possibly bring on this type of response. Did someone pass away, or like what happened to you for you to realize that something in the way I usually handle my business is a little different?
And you know what? Excuse me for cutting you off, but that's very important because oftentimes we shut down and we don't want to talk about it. So talking about it with somebody like Kendra is very therapeutic in itself.
Communicating has always been an essential part of living.
Absolutely.
To communicate. Now, this thing about the holidays, people out there shopping, why spend more money than you have?
Well, that could be actually, when we talk about depressive symptoms, that could be one of them.
It could be a sign of it.
Yeah, like overspending, overeating, anything that could dig you in a deeper hole. Could
Over
be something.
drinking,
Yeah.
drinking too much, very, very closely associated with that kind of behavior.
And then I noticed when we were talking earlier, you shared with me people that are diabetics can suffer depression.
Absolutely. There's a new syndrome that doctors are not talking about, but is certainly present, and it's called diabetic depression. And the interesting thing about it is we don't know whether or not the diabetes caused the depression or the depression caused the diabetes. Now, by that I mean, oftentimes when people get diagnosed with having diabetes, the mere fact that they get diagnosed is so catastrophic to them that they just shut down. It's the loss of health. That means now I can't do all of the bad things that I was doing to cause me to get this way, and I'm going to need to make some changes. And the mere fact that I'm going to need to make some changes means that I'm going to have to do some things differently, and that in itself can be depressive.
Okay, we've been talking about all these symptoms. We're going to take a station break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about solutions to the depression that people are experiencing. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Bounce Around Charleston, talking with Dr. Thaddeus Bell and Kendra Snipe about depression. And we've talked about the symptoms. Now let's talk about some ways of helping in this area. What can a person do to get help?
Well, first of all, you both brought up excellent points in the last segment talking about recognizing that something was wrong for yourself. You said you noticed that it was uncharacteristic of you to just let things pile up on your bed.
Yes.
You also, Dr. Bell, you said that you had some friends who recognized that your behaviors were uncharacteristic.
Right.
So having people to hold you accountable if you're not holding yourself accountable is one way that you can counteract some of the issues that could possibly surface with depression.
And then we're both in the public's eye. So when we came out, we had to put up this front.
That's right.
So people would know that we were depressed.
That's right. And you know, oftentimes, and we've seen that happen with a lot of political figures and actors and actors and people who we put on a stage. But we have to remember that these people have personal lives. They have things going on in their lives. And sometimes these things get they build up and they become difficult to deal with, and then they manifest themselves as something catastrophic like taking your own life.
What are some other things?
Well, we also talked about mentioning some public figures. There was one in particular a couple of months ago where an actor,
Robin Williams.
That was something that was huge in the headlines. So I think that kind of came home for a lot of people, that you just never know what's happening at home. And just knowing some of your resources when you're noticing things that are a little different for someone. Well,
one of the things that Kendra sent me an article the other day, you may want to summarize that, about the young man who went into Florida, went into the library at Florida State.
Yes.
District attorney, assistant district attorney. What the public did not know is that he had a lot of symptoms that a lot of people, a lot of his friends picked up on. He actually was emailing people, telling them that he had all these issues going on, and people just kind of pushed him off.
And why is it that people do that?
That's a very uncomfortable topic of discussion. So when you hear of depression, it's just like, you don't even know what am I supposed to say to someone who says I'm depressed, because the first thing you think of is, well, I have my own problems, so I don't even know how to begin to help you. So that's why it's important that even if you're not going through it, make sure that you know resources of people who can help that person. So just being able to see them to the place that they could get those services.
So now we're in the holiday season, and we want families to enjoy it and have a great time with all the lights and the Christmas trees. So families should be paying attention to one another.
Families should definitely be paying attention to one another's behavior, and if you see something that's atypical, then you should ask the person about it. It's not uncommon, particularly among African Americans, to have this thing that if you're depressed, you're crazy. Mm-hmm. There's a connection that we have had historically about mental issues in general in the African American community. So it's kind of like one of those hidden things that we don't like to talk about. When all of the studies in our clinical experiences tell us that these things do exist in our family, and we're going to have a change in our attitude and recognize. A lot of people say, well, don't discuss depression with somebody because you'll make them even more depressed. Well, that's a fallacy.
Okay, so now finally, tell us in your final statement what a person should do not to be depressed this holiday season.
Well, I mean, it's not quite that simple,
Not
but but first of all, just recognizing that something is wrong. Something is wrong. Historically, we did not have those resources to go to someone and be able to trust someone enough to say, this is what's happening. I need someone to help walk me through this.
What should a family member do?
A family, as far as supporting someone, well, let them know you don't have to tell me, but there is someone who is by law, like they are not allowed to discuss anything outside of that room. So they literally can go to jail if they share any of your personal information. So if it's about if it's about confidentiality, that's a way to kind of make them feel better about it. But just having the resources.
Any final words, doctor? They
can see a doctor, a primary care physician to discuss that issue with. They can see a pastor. If you have a good relationship with your pastor, and I would like to hope that many pastors, if they don't feel comfortable, then play a role in helping to get the patient to someone who does feel comfortable dealing with the issue.
And the reason why, because there's two areas. One is called pastoral care and then pastoral counseling.
Right.
If you're not equipped to be a counselor, you can't counsel people, but you can show pastoral care.
Right. And then, if your doctor recommends that you go on medications, I went on medications. I stayed on medications for about 6 months. Medications do work. You don't have to be on medications the rest of your life. You can come off the medications once the situation gets better.
Okay.
So trusting other people who can help you is paramount.
Thank you. Well, we thank Dr. Thaddeus Bell and Kendra Snipe for being here on Bounce Around Charleston as we talk about a serious matter, holiday depression. We'll be right back after this break.